West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
I was born a Republican. My family was a Republican, raised a Republican. I'm one of those weird people. I read the Constitution quite often. If something comes up and I'm curious, I have one that I keep next to where I sit and watch TV. I also have one in my purse.
A lot of constitutions. Hi, everyone. It's Ali Velshi. It's 5 o'clock in New York. I'm in for Nicole Wallace. That woman who you just heard from is 91-year-old Norma Anderson. She's a former fixture in the Colorado state legislature and a woman who could possibly take down Donald Trump's 2024 candidacy. Anderson is among the Colorado voters who are challenging Trump's eligibility to hold office again, saying that he disqualified himself by engaging in insurrection on and around January the 6th. Colorado Supreme Court ruled in favor of Anderson and the other plaintiffs back in December, but Trump appealed that decision, and it will now be in front of the United States Supreme Court. This Thursday, arguments begin before the nation's highest court, whose ruling could have an impact on all 50 states, not just Colorado. But as the Washington Post notes, the court may not provide a definitive ruling. Quote, the justices, 3 of whom were nominated by Trump, cementing a conservative majority, could rule in his favor without ever answering whether the attack was an insurrection or whether Trump is an insurrectionist. The court could avoid those questions by determining that Trump never took an oath that subjects him to the part of the Constitution barring insurrectionists from office, finding that the presidency is not covered by that provision, or ruling that Congress, rather than the judiciary, gets to decide who is barred from office. However, to Anderson, the facts are clear.
He proved the case. He committed insurrection.
Do you trust this court to make the right decision?
I've always trusted the courts before. I don't think the younger generation truly understand how close they are to losing their democracy.
And that's what it comes down to, Anderson says, protecting American democracy. She told the Post, quote, the very first time I ever ran, I didn't win. I didn't go out and try to change the election. I said, whoops, work harder next time, lady. End quote. Just a few hours ago, Trump's team filed its last reply brief, a final word before arguments begin. The 30-page brief was filled with claims that he's already made, such as the president is not an officer of the state, which is the terminology used in Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, and that January 6th was not an insurrection, so he couldn't have engaged in one. And that's where we start this hour with MSNBC legal analyst Lisa Rubin and New York Times editorial board member Mara Gay, both with me on set, plus MSNBC columnist and contributor Charlie Sykes with us as well. Charlie, you got to come and join the party one of these days. We're having a nice time here. Lisa, let's start with you. the two questions at hand, the legal questions at hand, whether or not Donald Trump is an officer or whether or not he engaged in an insurrection. Let's deal with the insurrection part. For better or for worse, they're making the argument that no one has ever tried the fact that there is an insurrection. The Colorado Supreme Court really did examine this in remarkable detail. They went through a lot of options and concluded that that was an insurrection on January 6th. Why doesn't that hold?
Well, it could hold, right? It is what we call a mixed question of law and fact, but the factual findings of a trial court are supposed to be given deference by an appellate court, including the U.S. Supreme Court, unless they are clearly erroneous. Donald Trump's folks say because they are sort of enmeshed with constitutional interpretation, this court should feel free to throw them out and revisit the whole thing entirely. Folks like Norma Anderson, on the other hand, are saying, no. A court has already found all of these facts after a week-long trial. They found that that it was an insurrection and that Trump engaged in it, which is also crucial to the language of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment.
But the court's not struggling with the engaged in part. They're struggling, or what I think the court's going to struggle with is, was it an insurrection?
I think the court's going to try to avoid that entirely,
Right.
Ali, because I think there are a number of legal issues that are strictly legal interpretive issues, and they also include, did he take the necessary oath in Section 3? Yeah. It's an oath to support the Constitution. Trump's people say because the presidential oath is to protect and defend and preserve the Constitution, he's not covered by Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. They say he's not an officer within the meaning of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. And perhaps my favorite argument of theirs is because the 14th Amendment refers to holding office, that it is either premature or just not even a question right now at all.
About being on the ballot.
Correct. And they say that it's really a disability that Congress can remove up to and including through 2029, so that if he is elected, Congress then has 4 more years during what would be his second term to determine if he is prevented from holding office.
Which is a fine idea, except he's going to be dictator just for a day, he says, just to drill and build a wall. But I think we know that's not going to work. So if Norma Anderson and people like her, Republicans in many cases, are worried about the upholding of democracy, that this case is about the upholding of democracy in America, we can't be assured that other institutions in America, i.e. Congress, will do their part. We've seen since January 6th of 2021 that they haven't. There's no indication they will now.
Well, I would just say that Donald Trump has clearly tested every American institution, every American tradition, every norm of democracy, and blown right past many of them. Now, fortunately, others held. Of course, on January 6th, ultimately, those votes were counted and Joe Biden was sworn in as president. So what we're seeing here is that, this is happening again. The irony for me is really that you have a president who appointed someone to the Supreme Court who is supposedly an originalist. And so we have a situation now where you have to think about the intent of that amendment. I think if you go back to Reconstruction, I know that for most Americans that seems really nerdy, but actually it's quite relevant here.
Well, it's relevant because that's where this amendment came out of.
That's where this amendment came out of, because actually the Civil War was fought by people who betrayed the Union. And so this amendment is an attempt to say, we don't want this to happen again. We want to preserve not just the Union, but democracy from traitors and threats to it. And so the spirit of that amendment is obvious. You don't need to be a lawyer. I'm glad we have one here, but you don't need to be a lawyer to understand the intent of that. And to say that that is not relevant is also laughable, because here we have a former president who is a clear and present threat to democracy in the United States. So I think it's, the law, the legal case of it will play out. The Supreme Court is certainly, a wild card. Yep. At the same time, I think that this is a clear and shut case of a former president who's a clear and present danger. And so it's hard to understand as a layman how he doesn't fit the description of someone who should be barred from that ballot.
So, Charlie, when the court looks at these things, for non-lawyers like me sit there and say, all right, there are originalists and textualists who say this is what the words actually mean and this is what they actually intended. And there are others who say the world has changed, so within the context of what they really meant, this is how it would apply today. I think Mara makes a really important point. Whether you read the words as they were meant, as they were written, or whether you fully understand the intent of the amendment, because it was after the Civil War, it was actually about that, you would come to the same conclusion. This isn't like some weird thing that the people who wrote that amendment weren't thinking about. It's kind of exactly what they were thinking about.
No, I agree completely. But what the court should do is not necessarily the same thing as what it will do. What are the justices thinking? They're thinking that they do not want to be put in the middle of this. This is John Roberts' worst nightmare. You want to be remembered as the Roberts Court. This is exactly the kind of things that Supreme Court justices don't really like to do. So even though the arguments that Lisa laid out very, very clearly are, I think, as a layman, are completely ludicrous. The idea that that doesn't apply to the President of the United States, or that it only applies to serving in office. These are laughable arguments, but these are the kinds of off-ramps that justices who do not want to be in the middle of this are likely to take. I agree with you. I think the language is clear. I think the application is clear. The court should apply the 14th Amendment. I think it's highly unlikely they will, because despite all of the protestations about being originalist, ultimately the court is a political body as well as a legal body, and I just don't think they're going to do this, which means that ultimately the final guardrail is still going to be the American public in November. I don't know that they're going to save us, and anyone who expects that the Supreme Court is going to save us from this, I think is engaging in some wish casting.
So if that doesn't happen, Charlie, let's say the Supreme Court does what some very smart lawyers are suggesting they will do. They'll punt on this one. Are we worse off or better off than whether this case had never been brought?
No, I think we're still better off, because I think these issues need to be aired out here. And you made a point in the last hour that I hope we don't gloss over. And I hope that the justices keep it in mind, because as Mara mentioned a few minutes ago, Donald Trump has violated or challenged every single norm in our culture. And in the last couple of days, we've seen some of his supporters like J.D. Vance floating the idea that a president could ignore the rulings of the U.S. Supreme Court, invoking Andrew Jackson's alleged comment, Justice Marshall has made his ruling, now let him enforce it. So I think that, and again, we need to be at this moment of saying, where are the guardrails? Do we have a president and a court that will ignore the Constitution? Might we have a president who would ignore not just the Constitution, not just the law, but also rulings of the U.S. Supreme Court? We are headed into really fraught and dangerous territory here. I don't think this will change the justice's mind, but they need to keep in mind that Trump and his circle are already beginning to play with that kind of dangerous, extra anti-constitutional rhetoric and logic.
It is Tuesday, the 6th of February of 2024, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, the little Yorkie, is our door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special, daily special, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. A small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. It always has, and it always will. Yes. Well, how are you? We are, I guess, hot and heavy into election season. Super Tuesdays are just around the corner. And it looks like, yes, of course, the Supreme Court will be hearing Trump's 14th Amendment case on Thursday. Eileen Cannon has set a day, I believe, next Tuesday. Is that true? I think it's Tuesday. Because, because of the documents case, each of the parties, counsels will come in by themselves. I mean, essentially their team without the other team present. And let's see, Trump's team gets the morning, and Jack Smith's team gets the afternoon. And presumably, this is all pro forma stuff. Well, to a degree. What they're going to do is that Trump's team is going to say, this is what we want to see. And then Jack Smith's team is going to say, no, they can't see this. They can get a summary. And apparently Eileen Cannon, who has never had any kind of experience in this, other than the fact that her husband's mobbed up with the Bonanno family, other than that, she gets to rule on this apparently, and hopefully soon. But we know how that's going to work. That's right. So everything seems to be coming to a head. Now, there is this presumption that we have to make sure that, the guy at least is in trial when the election starts. One would hope. And one would hope that things had been adjudicated before then so that we would all know that the guy running shouldn't be running because he's an insurrectionist, treasonous guy who stole top secrets and sold them to our mortal enemies who are at war with us at this very moment. And everybody thinks that, if we don't get that ruling, that we're all going to hell in a handbasket because he's just going to win. And that's the presumption that they could cheat that well. Because Joe's going to beat him by 15 million at least. I'm thinking more like 20 or more million. I think America's fed up with this bullshit. America doesn't want mobsters running us. Oh, sure, there's a visible vocal group who do total immersion baptisms in horse troughs. What's up with that? I know. They used to do it back on the farm, back in the olden days. But those horse troughs were at least made out of wood and a bit bigger. Now they're like the metal tub that you feed and they're not even horse troughs. They're feeders. Who wants to do that? So, that's a small minority, I don't even think it's a third of the electorate, to be honest with you. I think it's something much more concentrated, much more toxic. But because they get a lot of airtime, it's sort of like that literal burning dumpster in front of the federal building during the Black Lives Matter protests, where everybody, even down here in Southern Oregon, all the MAGAs say, Portland was burned to the ground. It was on TV. It's the same dumpster fire in front of the federal building that never burned down. They say is evidence that the whole town was burned down. It's a hellhole of liberal Democrats. Oh, really? So, because we see the same idiotic BS from these bad actors that we call the deplorable MAGA, it's easy to believe that could be the prevailing opinion throughout the whole nation, and of course we know it's not. Okay? But I think people are fed up. And so, maybe we shouldn't be all up in arms that this guy has somehow been able to manipulate a corrupted judiciary, corrupted by the Kochs and their friends, the Mercers and the Petersons and the Kochs at all. We're seeing how that's working out, huh? Well, there has been an argument that when you reach a certain economic plateau, or not even a plateau, an economic state, that nations don't really mean much to you. National allegiances, helping your neighbor, you don't care. You're too rich to worry about that. You go where you want to go, wherever the wind blows. Yeah, except people like that think that they are controlling the wind, too. They control everything. Speaking of which, what the hell is Elon Musk doing pushing the great replacement theory and every other crackpot theory relentlessly. I like that, relentlessly. On his platform there. And this guy has government contracts, defense contracts. I think that really people ought to start considering nationalizing Starlink. I think this guy's gone too far. Do we really want this guy in charge of that when the shit comes down? He already has, we already have evidence of what he will do. Look what he did to Ukraine for Russia. He determined, that's the kind of battle tactics I don't think should be used. Well, shit, Sherlock, great for you. But I thought, in the great scheme of things, a contract was a contract. You signed a contract. And now you're making up the rules because it's your little baby. It's not even his baby. I wish we could get over this lie that Elon Musk has developed anything. He bought the companies. And then he kicked out the people who developed the product so that he could claim it as his own. He did the same thing when he lied about his immigration status, and now he's saying illegal immigrants are coming here to vote. It's almost like he doesn't realize how long it takes to become a naturalized citizen and get not just a green card, but your citizenship so that you can then vote. Because apparently this guy didn't follow that. The way he's talking, I'm pretty sure this guy violated the law and voted before he should have been allowed to. Mark my words. I think that this guy is doing everything that he's claiming other people are doing because that's what they do with a capital T. And a guy who's like blasted out of his brain on drugs. Now, I gotta confess, I'm not alone in our, youthful experimental periods of our lives. Like in college. Some of us got rather damaged. Yes, they did. Some of us realized, at some point, maybe, we can, determine that the experiment is over. I mean, don't we know what the results are now? Do we continue this experiment? So, I'm not one to judge people for, their experimentation. But I will judge people when that experimentation is no longer an experimentation and it is a wacko addiction. I mean, this guy, I keep telling everybody for quite a while now, this guy's going to end up like the long-fingernailed, long-haired recluse Howard Hughes holed up on the top floor. It was only the 5th floor, but it was the highest building in town at the time. In his 5th floor penthouse abode, he's going to end up like that. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe not the long hair. Maybe he will get the long hair. Who knows? I don't know. He looks a little bald up on the pate. But the long fingernails and all that other stuff, yeah, that's in the cards. Because this guy apparently is also not forcing necessarily, but people feel like they have to take these drugs too. All right. That's taking the cult of personality a little bit too far. Maybe people should be forced to go through Catholic school for a bit so that they can finally say when they've broken away from it, I was once part of one of the oldest cults in the world. Why the hell would I want to join up one of these unthought, unrealized new ones? So, gives you a little critical eye. You're on the, your little hairs on the back of your neck kind of raise up. when certain things happen. Oh, yeah, well, I'm not going to follow Free John down to Fiji and get eaten by sharks in the coral. I wouldn't do it. Some people did. They didn't get eaten by sharks in the coral, but they could have. Okay, enough of that. It's only Tuesday. Program note for next week. Yes, no show on Monday. We'll figure out what will happen in this time slot. I haven't quite decided yet, because that is a travel day, coming back from my dad's birthday, which will be coming this Saturday, the 10th. 96. We love our dad. And so we're all meeting up with him in Southern California, which is being inundated as I speak. Biblical floods. They don't have an ark big enough to get 2x2 on board down there, even with the Queen Mary. Is the Queen Mary still there? I think it is. It floats. Is it? Maybe they took the Queen Mary away. Sad. All right, what do we have in store for you here in the Bistro Cafe as we begin this fine Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays? Well, yeah, at the top, we alluded quite a bit to Donald Trump testing every norm of decency. Every norm. Yes. On the rest of the menu, the quasi-independent oversight board implored Meta, that's the owner of Facebook, to rethink its policy on manipulated media in this high-stakes election year. We'll have what that oversight board, an explanation of it when we get into that article. But this comes about because of some sort of weird AI-generated video of Joe and his daughter. Okay. And apparently Facebook says, oh, yeah, people can do whatever they want. Right as the election year was beginning and Trump was doing his BS. Let's not forget, Trump got a private team from Facebook to guide him through the 2016 election. Guess who Facebook didn't give a team to? Yeah, Hillary. And she's the one everybody was saying, but her emails. And Facebook, just saying. Let's see what else is next. Oh, the family of 4 black girls mistakenly handcuffed by Colorado police and held at gunpoint when they're face down on the pavement, by the way. Well, they've reached a $1.9 million settlement, and I think it should have been more. And the town manager of a quaint New Hampshire town that has just recently become known for its arts, theater, and music festivals has quit after unrelenting anti-gay pressure from a Republican state senator who is also a town select board member. Some people don't want all this new innovation, not one whit. After the break, we move to the chef's table where Cambodia's ruling party claims a leading rights activist defamed it and is seeking $500,000 in damages. That's $500,000. And the leaders of the United Kingdom and Ireland went to Belfast to meet Northern Ireland's newly revived government. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. You're going to forego the usuals that usually happens at this usual time. Just to mention that a couple of tidbits of news that I should have mentioned more at the top. Of course, I did stick my head out of the bubble and noticed that the three-member panel on the appeals court denied Trump's immunity claim unanimously. So I didn't bother to listen to any analysis. Is he going to try to bump this up to en banc, or is that already a foregone, or is that not done? I'm wondering. We'll find out. But regardless, no immunity for him. And, of course, Toby Keith passed away. Looks like from stomach cancer. So I'm not going to, as much as I didn't really care for the fellow, I'm not going to make any jokes about it. That's not a nice way to go. Apparently, I mean, if you take his lyrics and his song choices, and did he write those? He was a heavy drinker. You know, maybe a few other substances too. But regardless, 62, and I don't consider that old. No, I don't. I just don't. Alrighty. Let us now tuck into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy on this fabulous Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Once again, just as a reminder, we take our corn cobs with the husks still on. We soak them in a lime water bath for quite some time. And then we roast the corn in their husks so that they are, somewhat grilled inside the oven. Roast them up, and then we take those kernels off the corn. Oh, they are so sweet. And then they go right into the chowder, just so you know. Just so you know. Only the kernels, none of the silk, none of those little stringy things. All those are taken out because, casual and fine dining, there's a fine line between the two. And nothing says that casual dining means that you get the silk from the corn husk. No, you don't. Okay, just so you know what we do with our chowder on Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. This first offering here is by Allie Swenson from the Associated Press. An oversight board is criticizing Facebook owner Meta's policies regarding manipulated media as incoherent and insufficient to address the flood of online disinformation that already has begun to target elections across the globe this year. The quasi-independent board on yesterday, said its review of an altered video of President Joe Biden that spread on Facebook exposed gaps in the policy. The board said Meta should expand the policy to focus not only on videos generated with artificial intelligence, but on media regardless of how it was created. That includes fake audio recordings, which already have convincingly impersonated political candidates in the U.S. and elsewhere. The company also should clarify the harms it is trying to prevent and should label images, videos, and audio clips as manipulated instead of removing the posts altogether. And the Meta Oversight Board said, the board's feedback reflects the intense scrutiny that is facing many tech companies for their handling of election falsehoods in a year when voters in more than 50 countries go to the polls. As both generative artificial intelligence deepfakes and lower quality cheap fakes on social media threaten to mislead voters, the platforms are trying to catch up and respond to false posts while protecting users' rights to free speech. Meta said it is reviewing the Oversight Board's guidance and will respond publicly to the recommendations within 60 days. 11 of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. The 4 black girls lay face down in a parking lot crying no and mommy as a police officer who had pointed her gun at them bent down to handcuff 2 of their wrists. The youngest wore a pink tiara as she held on to her teenage cousin's hand. The 6-year-old Lovely watched as her mother, Brittany Gilliam, was led to a patrol car in handcuffs after she shouted in frustration at the police, who mistakenly believed the car Gilliam was driving was stolen. Over 3 years later, the Denver suburb of Aurora has agreed to a $1.9 million settlement with Gilliam and the girls to resolve a lawsuit that claimed the police officers' actions were evidence of profound systemic racism. A lawyer for the family, David Lane, announced on Monday. Wait until DeSantis and others hear about this. The settlement saved the girls the trauma of having to relive what happened during a trial, Lane said. The money will be evenly divided among Gilliam and the 4 girls, with the girls' portions being placed into annuities, so the money will grow by the time they access it when they turn 18, Lane said. And it says that all parties are very satisfied with the settlement. In a written statement, the city confirmed a deal has been reached. The Aurora Police Department remains committed to strengthening the relationship with the community through accountability and continuously improving how it serves the public, it said. Well, that's not saying much. McCormick of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The quaint town of Littleton, New Hampshire is seeing more tourists drawn to a main street of shops and restaurants where rainbow colors and gay pride symbols can be seen alongside American flags. Its population of 6,000 is growing younger and more diverse, supporting LGBTQ-themed art and a local theater's gay-themed musical. The culture does not sit well with Town Select Board member Carrie Gendreau, who also serves as a Republican state senator. Last year, she said that homosexuality is an abomination and spoke of regulating art on public property, prompting a backlash, and now the resignation of the town manager whose late son was gay. My son is not an abomination, Jim Gleason told the select board in January to a standing ovation when he announced his last day was Friday. He accused Gendreau of creating a toxic work environment by repeatedly making derogatory comments about gay people. Friday also was Gendreau's deadline to file for re-election to the board, but she didn't, so her 3-year term ends in March. A former mill town in the White Mountains, Littleton reversed a long decline, in part through art. Tourists come now for antiques, galleries, boutiques, and the world's longest candy counter. You also look at the bronze statue of Pollyanna, erected outside the public library to honor the 1913 book by local author Eleanor H. Porter, whose main character came to define relentless optimism. Pollyanna's motto, "Be glad," which hangs from banners up and down Main Street, has been tested as townspeople found themselves debating over inclusion, tolerance, and equality. Why is that a debate? The controversy began in August after 3 small murals funded by a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion grant appeared on the side of a building that houses a restaurant and clothing store. Covering boarded-up windows, the murals show a white iris against a color wheel, 2 birch trees bending under a night sky, and a dandelion reaching skyward from an open book. "What went up was not good," said Jean Drew, using the select board's audience to research what such symbols really mean. "I don't want that to be in our town. I don't want it to be here." The board then sought an attorney's advice on what they could do to regulate artistic expression on town property. And Jean Drew gave several interviews telling the Boston Globe that the iris painting carried demonic hidden messages. The artist, Meg Reinhold, said her We Are Joy painting was inspired by Iris, the Greek goddess of rainbows. She told the AP in an email that she hoped to evoke feelings of joy and empowerment and add some beauty to Littleton and celebrate people living with pride in the LGBTQ+ community. If a viewer looks at these works and sees demons and darkness, what does that tell us about how they view the world, Reinhold said. Indeed. All right, that brings us to our break, and when we get back from our break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Welcome to A Cup of Health with CDC, a weekly feature of the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. I'm your host, Dr. Robert Gaines. Arthritis affects more than 1 in 5 adults and is the most common cause of disability in the United States. Dr. Camille Barber is a researcher with CDC's National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion. He's joining us today to discuss ways to control arthritis. Welcome to the show, Camille.
Thank you.
Camille, are there different types of arthritis?
Yes, there are over 100 types. The most common types are osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, gout, and fibromyalgia.
What are the symptoms of arthritis?
Arthritis, which is joint inflammation, can result in pain, stiffness, and swelling in the joints.
Does arthritis affect some people more than others?
Yes, it affects primarily the elderly. It also affects people with chronic conditions such as heart disease, diabetes, and obesity. And it's also much higher in women compared to men.
What are some strategies for managing arthritis pain?
Now, adults with arthritis may be reluctant to engage in physical activity because of the symptoms that they have, such as joint pain and stiffness. However, we know that there are low-impact types of physical activities, such as walking and swimming, that have been shown to improve function and reduce pain in adults with arthritis. There are also self-management programs that, in addition to these physical activity programs, have different ways to maintain weight and other ways to control your arthritis symptoms.
How can people reduce their risk of developing arthritis?
So as I said earlier, osteoarthritis is the most common type of arthritis, and the best way to reduce your chances of developing it is to maintain a normal weight and avoid joint injury.
Camille, where can listeners get more information about arthritis, including the self-management program?
Listeners can go to cdc.gov/arthritis.
Thanks, Camille. I've been talking today with CDC's Dr. Camille Barber about ways to control the pain caused by arthritis. Remember, although there's no cure, arthritis can be controlled through medical treatment, regular exercise, and weight maintenance. If you suffer from arthritis, talk to a healthcare provider about programs to manage your condition. Until next time, be well. This is Dr. Robert Gaines for A Cup of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
You're listening to the American Democracy Minute, keeping your government by and for the people. Thursday, February 8th, 10 a.m. Eastern, the U.S. Supreme Court hears a challenge from former President Donald Trump to Colorado's decision to ban him from the state's presidential primary under the 14th Amendment. The amendment's Section 3 was implemented after the Civil War to keep former Confederate leaders from holding office. It specifies that an officer of the United States who took an oath to protect the Constitution but engaged in insurrection or gave aid or comfort to those who did is ineligible to hold office. The questions likely to be raised by Trump's lawyers are, is the president an officer of the United States as defined by the 14th Amendment Section 3? Does the 14th Amendment even allow states to enforce Section 3, or is it solely Congress's responsibility? And does blocking a political party from offering the candidates of its choice violate the party's right to free speech? Failure to meet any of these standards results in Trump remaining on the ballot. The Colorado Supreme Court found 25 instances where the Constitution referred to the office of the president. It also found that the evidence substantiated that Trump engaged in insurrection and that a conviction was not required to meet this standard. We have links to an excellent explanation of these issues at SCOTUS blog and a link to the U.S. Supreme Court's Thursday audio feed at AmericanDemocracyMinute.org. I'm Brian Beal. Follow us on Facebook at American Democracy Minute.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1919. That day began the week-long general strike in Seattle, Washington. As World War I drew to a close, many workers in the city were frustrated by 2 years without pay increases due to the war. 35,000 workers in the shipyards walked off the job. Workers from most of the 110 union locals across the city voted to support the general strike. At 10 a.m. on February 6th, the citywide strike began. As many as 65,000 workers, or a fifth of the entire workforce of the city, walked off the job. They were met by a combined force of the police and the military. It has been nearly a century since the Seattle general strike. This unprecedented stand by the city's workers has been remembered and commemorated in many ways. Perhaps the most innovative memorial came in the form of a rock opera. In 1985, Rob Rosenthal set the story of the strike to music. He based the lyrics on research and interviews he did as a graduate student at UC Santa Barbara over the course of 10 years. A band named The Fuse formed to record the 21-song album. The final project was a blend of rock, blues, and folk. The music tells the story of a fictional man who comes to Seattle looking for work in the shipyards during World War I, joining the labor movement and the strike. What labor history event would you like to hear set to music?
Without our muscle, without our brain, nothing would ever grow. We run it all. We run it all.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Who's in the city? Unless we say so. Let the bosses curse.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 41 degrees Fahrenheit with fairly foggy conditions at the moment. Temperatures expected to be cooler than yesterday with highs only in the mid to upper 40s. We should have a little bit of sunshine later on. It's a bit drizzly at the moment. Winds will be light and variable. Then partly cloudy skies early this evening will give way to showers overnight. Lows in the upper 30s. Winds light and variable, and we should get just a little less than a quarter inch of rain. And then tomorrow we should have occasional light rain, tapering to a few showers late. Highs in the low 40s, winds light and variable. Pollen is still rated none here in our little hamlet of Rogue River, Oregon. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 15 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is low at level 2. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.85 inches. Visibility is down to 1 mile, and relative humidity is at 100%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is the Weather Underground. London is 56 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 54 degrees and cloudy. Rome is 58 and sunny. Bagram is 25 and mostly cloudy. Kyiv is 36 degrees with light rain. Hong Kong is 66 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 40 degrees and mostly cloudy. Melbourne, Victoria, Australia is 58 degrees and fair. San Francisco, California is 48 degrees and mostly cloudy. Chicago, Illinois is 34 degrees with mist. And New York, New York is 36 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Staff at the World Desk of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Lawyers for Cambodia's ruling Cambodian People's Party filed a lawsuit yesterday, Monday, at the order of the party's leader, former Prime Minister Hun Sen, accusing a leading rights activist of defamation and seeking damages of $500,000. The complaint was filed in Phnom Penh Municipal Court against Song San Karuna, deputy chief of Cambodia's biggest rights group, ADHOC. The lawsuit asserts that remarks by Karuna caused dishonor to the ruling party. The court is expected to determine which law would be applicable for the complaint. There have been previous cases in which political opponents of the ruling party have been ordered to pay punitive damages after being found guilty of defamation. The complaint, according to a copy seen by the Associated Press, referred to comments Karuna made in a recent interview in which he allegedly said that the Cambodian People's Party used the country's courts as a tool to thwart or intimidate its political opponents. The lawsuit alleges that the remarks were exaggerated and dishonest and could cause the public to hate the ruling party ahead of Senate elections this month. The interview was posted online by the Cambodia Daily, a U.S.-based news website that evolved from a newspaper of the same name that stopped publishing in Cambodia in 2017 due to a tax dispute with the government then led by Hun Sen. In response to the lawsuit, Karuna said his interview was in support of strengthening social justice and democracy without serving the goals of any political party. He said he had no intention to attack any individual or political party, and that anyone who claimed he was attacking a specific party was misconstruing his words. Hun Sen announced on Sunday his intention to file the lawsuit. The 71-year-old Hun Sen retired as prime minister last August after leading Cambodia for 38 years. His son, Hun Manet, succeeded him.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Jill Lawless of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. The leaders of the UK and Ireland went to Belfast yesterday, Monday, to meet Northern Ireland's newly revived government and bask in a good news moment after 2 years of political crisis. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Irish counterpart Leo Varadkar visited the new administration at Belfast's Stormont Castle as its ministers met for the first time. The ministers wasted no time before pressing London for more money to patch up Northern Ireland's creaking public services. Members of the Northern Ireland Assembly appointed a power-sharing government on Saturday after a 2-year hiatus that was sparked when the main British Unionist Party walked out in February of 2022. The Democratic Unionist Party boycotted the administration to protest post-Brexit trading agreements that it said undermine Northern Ireland's place in the United Kingdom. The party was coaxed into returning last week after the UK promised to eliminate most checks on goods that were moving to Northern Ireland from the rest of the UK. Under power-sharing rules established as part of Northern Ireland's peace process, the administration in Belfast must include both British Unionists and Irish nationalists. The UK and the Republic of Ireland both have roles as guarantors of the peace. The new administration is led by First Minister Michelle O'Neill of Sinn Féin. The party allied with the Irish Republican Army during Northern Ireland's decades of violence known as the Troubles. Her appointment was historic, marking the first time an Irish nationalist who aspires to take Northern Ireland out of the UK and unite it with the Republic has held the post. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.